an arbitration lawyer, an advocate, is someone who has to persuade. And you're only going to persuade effectively by being yourself.
A few weeks ago, I met Mires Philippe in Paris, and I asked her who is someone who significantly contributed to equality in arbitration. And Mires said Eric Schwartz. So today I'm meeting Eric Schwartz, and I'm going to ask him to tell me why Mires mentioned his name. Hi, Eric. Good morning. How are you?
Morning. Well, I should say good afternoon for you.
Should we get started?
Yes.
So, Eric, first question. If you could turn back the time and be 18 again, would you choose the same career path?
Yes. But I have to add, it wasn't really a choice. Well, I think like many people in life, I came to arbitration by complete accident. I had no idea, even when I was in law school, that I would ever wind up practicing something called international arbitration, which I didn't even know existed as a field of activity.
Have you ever disliked the job?
Yes, the job of being a corporate lawyer, which is what I did before I discovered arbitration. I became a corporate lawyer. It was only when I was already practicing as a young lawyer in Paris that someone came up to me and said, would you help out on this case? It happens to be an ICC arbitration. And I said, sure, not knowing at all what this was all about. And simply by virtue of that one accidental work assignment, I discovered what became my professional vocation for the following 40 years.
So, Eric, a few weeks back, I sat down with Mires Philippe and I asked her, Mires, when you think back, who is someone who significantly contributed to promoting diversity in arbitration? And guess what? She mentioned you. So I'm curious, what is it that you did to impress Mires?
Well, that's very kind of Mires. I was, as you know, the Secretary General of the ICC court from 1992 through up until the end of 1996. And when I arrived at the ICC, the Secretariat was much smaller than it is today. There were 6 teams of case managers, and every team was composed of 3 people, a counsel, an assistant, and what we then called a secretary. Now you would call a legal assistant. But each of the team counsels was a man, and each of the assistants was a woman. And I found that to be absolutely extraordinary. I had not grown up in an environment where there would be such a glaring disparity in the positions of men and women in a legal organization. When I started working in law firms, there were already a number of women lawyers working in those firms. So I was a bit surprised by that fact. And when a counsel retired, I wanted to try to change that by appointing a woman to the position of counsel to replace one of the retiring men counsels. And at the same time, I wanted to upgrade the position of assistant, what was called assistant, to deputy counsel, because all of these women who were serving in that so-called assistant role were women lawyers, and I thought they should be called counsels, or at least deputy counsels as well. I encountered, to my astonishment, a great deal of resistance from the then president of the ICC court, who was of a different generation, a very traditional older generation that did not view women in the same way that people of my generation did. And therefore, what I thought would be an obvious no-brainer became actually an act of resistance. And I think Mirez appreciated the fact that in order to make that move in the context that then reigned within the ICC, it required a certain amount of conviction and principle that this situation was wrong and had to be changed. Since that time, the ICC, both in terms of the Secretariat and the ICC Court, has changed completely.
Hello, my name is Andrea, and I have the following question for myArbitration. What would be your advice for the future generation of arbitration practitioners? How can they build a career and network, especially in these times?
There is a huge amount of competition, which I recognize makes it very difficult for the young person who wishes to devote himself or herself to international arbitration. I think it therefore requires so much more work than might have been the case before, where you didn't have to deal with that. And I think you're right to bring up the fact that there's a lot of networking involved. But I think one has to start with the basics. You are working within a law firm environment where it's going to be very important to be able to get as much experience as you can. And that often means finding already a group that has a fair amount of international arbitration work and partners in the firm who take an interest in you and are committed to helping you gain that experience and promote yourself as an international arbitration lawyer by, first of all, becoming the very best lawyer that you can become, because mastering just the skills of becoming a good lawyer are really the first step to becoming a good international arbitration lawyer. And while that is so demanding and takes so much time, at the same time, if you want to become more broadly recognized within the community or the field, that means devoting yourself to various activities outside your work, which means that I don't know how there would be any time left in the day for anything else in today's environment. So persistence, patience, hard work, someone who really wants to do it can get there.
I have to ask now, what makes a good lawyer?
I think it requires a certain amount of openness to accept criticism and knowing who you are. I think it's very important, and I learned this very early on in being a good lawyer, to be yourself, not try to be someone else, because there are many different kinds of good lawyers, but an arbitration lawyer, an advocate, is someone who has to persuade. And you're only going to persuade effectively by being yourself and not trying to persuade the way someone else might do it. So establishing that level of comfort with yourself, with your own style, watching other effective advocates, and trying to adapt their style to yourself.
Eric, thank you for your time. Thank you for advice. I hope to see you soon. And meanwhile, stay healthy.
Okay, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And perhaps one of these days we'll be able to resume activities in person.